Hello and welcome back to Nerd Doc. We've had a couple of multiverse movies and still no sign of the X-Men in the main MCU timeline. However, we do have a few more hints as to how they'll enter the primary reality of the MCU. To discuss this topic, we do need to talk a bit about Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, so there will be spoilers for that movie if you haven't already seen it. We covered the main details that we know about X-Men 97 in a previous video that we'll link in the description below. That video covers release date, cast, confirmed characters, and more. This video will just talk about how X-Men 97 could tie into the greater MCU and potentially be MCU Canon. Let us know how you think the X-Men will enter the MCU in the comments below. Beau DeMayo is the head writer and executive producer on X-Men 97. Anytime he's asked about the series, he always makes it clear that this is the first Marvel Studios X-Men production, and everything else Marvel Studios has produced is considered MCU Canon. In a recent interview with The Direct, DeMayo was specifically asked if X-Men 97 would be canon. He had this to say in response. The one thing I can say towards that is, I know sometimes we say no comment and it's like they're just being obstinate. I'm gonna go with no comment here because part of the surprise will be finding that out when you experience the show. When pushed a bit further about whether or not the question of MCU canon would be an active mystery within the show, DeMayo followed with, I can't speak to marketing, but I think there's a degree of, you will be asking that question. If someone watching X-Men 97 is expected to ask the question of whether or not the show is MCU canon, it's highly probable the show will in fact be canon. But there's more to it than that. In another interview, DeMayo said that X-Men 97 will explore how the characters change after a very impactful event. Now this could just be referencing Professor X leaving during the series finale of the original show, since we know X-Men 97 picks up right after that happens. But what if that's not the event in question? What if the event is referring to something that brings the X-Men into the MCU? What if the event is actually an incursion? We already covered the details of an incursion in a recent Multiverse of Madness video that of course we'll link below, but at the end of the movie, Clea confirms that Doctor Strange has caused an incursion. An incursion is when two realities are colliding, which could destroy one or both realities. In the comics, there are many incursions, which eventually led to Secret Wars and Battleworld. That's very, very likely where the MCU will be heading over the next 5 years or so. An incursion allows characters from other realities to move around the multiverse. For example, this is how Miles Morales left the Ultimates universe in the comics, and after some other events, eventually ended up in the 616 universe. To that point, an incursion, or the aftermath of an incursion, could also be key in Spider-Man 4, which is where rumors say Marvel will first introduce Miles Morales. On that same line of thought, it could be how the X-Men make their way from X-Men the Animated Series and X-Men 97 to the main MCU timeline. Imagine X-Men 97 kicks off with the team discovering an incursion is happening. They set off in an attempt to stop the incursion, and the first season of the series ends with the mutants ending up in the main MCU timeline. If there's an incursion happening in X-Men 97, a year after we hear about an incursion in Multiverse of Madness, people are going to wonder if it's the same incursion, just seen from the other reality. It lines up well with DeMayo's comments. In the comics, it took 8 years for an incursion to happen after the initial Catalyst incident started everything in motion. It likely won't be that long in the MCU, but a year passing by between Multiverse of Madness and X-Men 97 is in line with a potential MCU incursion timeline. It may not even be the same exact incursion from Multiverse of Madness, since there are quite a few incursions that happen in the comics. Incursions aside, we also know that Michael Waldron, head writer for Multiverse of Madness and the Loki series, seems to be working on a script for an unknown X-Men project. If that's in the scripting phase right now, it means we can estimate it will start filming sometime in the first half of 2023, with a rough release window of maybe late 2024 at the earliest, about a year after X-Men 97, which is currently scheduled for late summer 2023. There aren't a lot of projects happening between X-Men 97 and that potential X-Men series that could bring mutants into the main MCU timeline. You've got Loki Season 2, and perhaps the Fantastic Four, depending on how that team comes into the MCU. Although our best guess is the Fantastic Four have been here all along, just off-planet somewhere, similar to how Captain Marvel was introduced. So why do we think X-Men 97 should be canon? It's one of the easiest ways to bring in mutants with their history intact. You could easily say they've been here all along and use something like the Genosha story arc to explain why we haven't seen them. You could even say Professor X was removing them from everyone's mind, or that Wanda's supposed death caused the reversal of a previous House of M that occurred long before the events of Iron Man 1 or the Incredible Hulk. Anything along those lines could potentially bring the mutants into the MCU, but using X-Men 97 instead makes X-Men the Animated Series canon as well, along with all the history that comes with it. If you want to know why Wolverine is so into Jean, or why Xavier and Magneto are at odds, just watch that series, which is available in full on Disney Plus right now. There's a lot more history there than in any of the Fox X-Men films, and you wouldn't have to backtrack to show any of that history after introducing the X-Men. It also covers a lot of popular comic arcs while still leaving room for new adventures in the MCU, especially with all the recent craziness going on in X-Men comics. As one final tidbit, when we see Professor Xavier in Multiverse of Madness, a new arrangement of the theme from the animated series plays. In the credits for the movie, it shows this is the X-Men 97 theme. That doesn't necessarily mean that Xavier in Multiverse of Madness is the same one from X-Men 97, but it is an interesting little nugget of information. We still have over a year until X-Men 97 lands on Disney+, but hopefully we'll have more clues or even some confirmation from Marvel before that time. Keep an eye on our Instagram, as any reliable rumors or news about X-Men in the MCU will hit there first. For now, that wraps up this video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who loves the X-Men.